we can talk about what it was like when you were working for him too, because I'm doing it now and I love it. I love working in this program.
Oh, right on.
It was really fun. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people just like you who are doing great things in the world. And today's guest really is amazing. If you don't know about her, you are going to love her. We've traveled in concentric circles for years, sometimes appearing together at events like the Dr. McDougall Celebrity Chef Weekend. And last time I saw her actually was probably 5 years ago when she was a judge in an Iron Chef competition that I was chefing at with Chef Ramses Bravo. And she just, you know, she's sort of like, she reminds me of John Pierre. She just embodies kindness, compassion. That's what she teaches. She's vegan, of course, and talented chef, many books, wonderful podcasts. But, you know, I put her in the same category as Saint Miyoko. She's one of those people that just, that's why, you know, I want to cry because it's a shirt from Miyoko. She's one of the people that inspires me to be a better person. Please welcome Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. I am so excited to talk to you.
Oh, that is the best introduction. Thank you. Those are really, really special people to be compared to.
Yeah. So you know, you're multi-talented. You podcast, you write cookbooks, you're a chef, but I think really the heart of you is this compassion piece, which I don't want to say I'm missing it, but it's not what I've been prioritizing. And it's funny how the universe keeps knocking on my door with these shows, because yesterday when I was interviewing John Mackey on conscious leadership, basically what he was talking about was compassion. And the show before I was interviewing a lady from Rancho La Puerta on intention setting, and then she's talking about forgiveness. So it's like, this just keeps showing up. And so this is one of the things I definitely want to talk to you about. But first I want to ask you how you are, how's the pandemic been treating you? What have you been up to? That kind of stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. We're good. We're here in Oakland, California. My husband and of course my two cats. Of course, Charlie is here with us today because the motto in our home is where I am, there they are. Yeah, we're good. One of the things that came of the pandemic is that I started teaching online cooking classes, which I hadn't been doing before. And so that was, you know, a positive thing that came out of it. I had already led a conference, a weekend-long conference online in February before COVID. And that was just perfect because it allowed me to pivot over to the online classes. So yeah, Zoom is our friend. And yeah, we hike a lot, I cook a lot, I write a lot. I'm very lucky that my husband and I really love being in each other's company because we've been in it incessantly. But that's what we chose, and it's really lovely. So yeah, so lots of lessons and gifts from 2020. How about you? How are you doing?
I feel bad that I'm doing so good, but this is how the show started, was as a chance to just communicate with what I thought was my group, but I pushed the wrong button on the first day and my show went out to everybody and people watched and then friends came on. So I created this daily show, sometimes 2 or 3 times daily, called Chef AJ Live. And I'm loving it because I really, believe it or not, like talking to other people more, interviewing them, hearing them, because I feel like I say the same thing over and over, you know, eat plants.
Yeah, right. How many variations of that can there be?
So tell us, you have a new book coming out. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it came out. It came out last year. It came out at the end of last year, and COVID did affect the book tour for it, which was unfortunate. And so it's a book called The Joyful Vegan, and it's really about. I had done a podcast series on what I call the 10 stages of what happens when you stop eating animals. And what it is really kind of the second part. The 30-Day Vegan Challenge is my book from 2011. And that book guides people through the transformation and the process of becoming vegan. And so covering all of the typical questions all of us get about protein, about B12, about calcium, about, you know, what to cook and what to eat, and, you know, and what about the holidays and where to shop, and kind of all of the basics that people all ask about when they first transition to being vegan. What I have found in the 20 years I've been doing this work is that, of course, there are many people who do stay vegan, but there are a lot of people who struggle. And they struggle not only staying vegan, but they struggle being joyful. They struggle staying joyful. They struggle just kind of navigating living in a non-vegan world, because that's the reality. And so what I started doing, AJ, which was really interesting, and I really loved it, was I started identifying these different experiences that I think are universal for all of us who go through this. And it's whether you go through it for ethical reasons or environmental reasons or health, it doesn't matter what door you came through, but living as a vegan or someone who's it doesn't matter, plant-based, vegan, just not being part of the status quo has its own challenges. And so I started identifying these stages, and they're not stages where you are, they're mandatory. They're not stages that you have to go through. They're rather kind of mirrors to hold up to say, this is typical for people who go through this. And does this look like you? And if so, here are the characteristics of these different stages. And then also here are the risks that if you don't manage this stage, you could A, stop being joyful, and B, stop being vegan. And so when I started doing that as a podcast series, people were just blown away because it gave them the language to say, that's me, that's what I'm going through. So for instance, stage 1 is the voracious consumption of information. So when you first become vegan, and again, whether it's for health or ethics, you just consume everything you could possibly consume to learn about this issue. You watch documentaries, you read books, right? You start cooking, you get cookbooks. And so that's stage 1, the voracious consumption of information. The risk, if you don't manage that, is that if you over-witness, you could actually get into some dangerous territory. And that goes for people who are kind of overwatching, slaughter videos, or even getting too obsessed around food. That can also be a problem. So I talk about the risks and then how to manage that so that you can stay joyful and you can stay vegan. Stage 2 is remorse, because a lot of people feel like, how could I not have known this? How could I be an adult, and a smart adult and an intelligent adult and a thinking adult, and not know this, whatever this is, whether it's about nutrition and it's about, animal products contributing to heart disease, or if it's about the torture that animals go through. How could I not have known this? And so I navigate people through that, because of course, if you don't manage remorse, you become so overwhelmed with guilt and shame that becomes a problem. So how do you manage that? Stage 3 is coming out. Stage 5 is anger. So people, when I would meet them at events, they would say, thank you so much for that series. I'm in stage 5 and I'm trying to get out of it. Like they had words for what their experiences were. And I just loved that. And so I wanted to put it in a book. And so I did. And that's the book that came out last year, which is called The Joyful Vegan. So that's the gist of it.
Well, here's a question from Mandy. Would you recommend this book for somebody that's already a long-term vegan?
Definitely. And I think I've had this conversation with my publisher, because, the titles and the subtitles are the hardest things, because you just want to nail it, and it's not always easy. And so the subtitle is How to Stay Vegan in a Non-Vegan World, how to stay vegan in a world that wants you to eat meat, dairy, and eggs. And I know that there are vegans who look at that subtitle and say, well, that's not me. I'm always going to be vegan. I would never not be vegan. And it's like, well, that's not only what it's about. It is, first of all, about, again, kind of finding a language for the experiences that we all encounter in this non-vegan world. My favorite chapter is chapter 1, which is willful blindness.
Yeah, what is that? Because I like that term a lot, because I listen.
Yeah, I'll talk about it, because what I want to say is that even if you don't think you're at risk for stopping being vegan, the other issue is that we have to understand why other people do stop. And we have to understand why people struggle. It's not enough to say, well, they didn't care enough, or they're not compassionate enough, or they're too selfish. That's not an answer. That doesn't get us anywhere. So if you can understand why people struggle, then you're going to be better able to support them and help them. And then, like I said, understanding why people avoid becoming vegan in the first place. When I say becoming vegan, I mean reflecting their own values of compassion and wellness. So if people are going, don't tell me, I don't want to know, well, why are they doing that? Well, they're evil. No, that's not the reason, right? The majority of people walking around on this planet are not evil, and they're not stupid, and they're not unkind. What they are is willfully blind. And so what does that mean? We are human beings who I believe at our core are compassionate. We want to do the right thing. In fact, we as a species have to believe we are good people. That is part of like our makeup. We have to believe we're good people. That's why we couch even things that are harmful in positive ways, because we have to believe that what we're doing is good, right? So we have to have this belief and perception of ourselves. When we go about our lives and we participate in things that are anathema to that are antithetical to the things that make us good, we have to then, now we have this cognitive dissonance, right? We're good people, but we're contributing to harm. We're compassionate, but we're contributing to violence, right? We care about the earth, but we're contributing to the degradation of environmental, integrity. So in order to reconcile that, you have to either change your thinking about what you're doing, or you have to change your behavior, right? And what's going to be the easiest thing of the two is to change the way we think about what we're doing. So we have to reframe harmful behavior in a way that's positive. And that's literally what willful blindness is. It's a way to reconcile that cognitive dissonance that says, I'm a good person, but I'm contributing to harm. So you can't hold both of those things. You have to choose one or the other. Many people choose changing behavior and they become vegetarian or they become vegan. Many people choose the willful blindness until they can't anymore. And so we live in a society and among people that contributes to us wanting to be willfully blind. We all support each other in being willfully blind. We surround ourselves with people who believe the same things we do. The companies and the industries that want us to believe that there's no harm in consuming animal products give us the marketing language, and then we take it and we regurgitate it. So we're supported in that willful blindness, so much so that's why when someone becomes vegan, everyone gets angry, because you're basically upsetting the whole structure and you're rocking the boat. So understanding that that's the structure and understanding that that's what we're doing, I think is really helpful to not only feeling more confident in your own decisions, but also supporting others in theirs.
Yeah. You mentioned that we live in a society where people value convenience over compassion.
Absolutely. I mean, so again, it's not that we're not compassionate. It's that we're kind of always choosing one thing or another. And we live in a society where, of course, the quickest, most convenient, easiest thing is usually valued. And that's why we have fast food restaurants. That's why it can barely be called food. But that's why we have, to-go meat. That's why we have all these frozen processed products, because we want something that's just going to take 5 minutes to make. We think that's, the good thing. Well, if you're rushed for time, maybe as an exception, that's fine. But as the rule, there are consequences to that. And so if we're constantly choosing things that we think are the easiest path, there's usually consequences, and not just to ourselves. So that's a huge aspect. And then the other part of all of this, and it has to be said, is that the focus in the Joyful Vegan is really on the social aspects, is really as us as social beings. And there are people who will say, and there are vegans who will say, well, if someone just cares about what other people think, then they're selfish. I'm not like that. I don't care what people think. I'm going to stay vegan for the animals, whatever it is. Well, good for you. And that's not how we're made up. We're made up as social creatures. We evolved as social creatures, and being part of a community means everything to us. And if we feel that we're just constantly battling our friends, our family, society, coworkers, neighbors, if we're constantly feeling at odds, and you think that being vegan is the thing that puts you at odds, you're going to say, well, I can't do this. Now, you're not going to couch that in, I can't do this, I failed. You're going to couch this in, this was too hard, it's not healthy, I got sick, right? You have to couch it in a positive way. However, I just want to end with this. there may be situations where you feel like you're at odds, and you may have conflict with your family, and you may have conflict with neighbors, and it might feel annoying to always have to be the one saying, can we go to this restaurant? Can we get this food? But that's on us. And so in the end, all of this is about how we respond to this. And that's what I give people the tools for, is feeling confident, is understanding why family pushes back and not taking it personally, in learning how to communicate what we want. You know, you go to a restaurant and you're like, I'm so sorry, I'm such a pain, I'm going to be the pain in the butt vegan. Can you tell me if there's any animal products? Well, how do you think people are going to respond to that? They're going to be like, oh God, it's that person. But if you show up and you're like, hey, I don't eat animal products, can you tell me what I can eat on your menu? Then people go, okay, I'll tell you, right? So how we present this to the world also determines how other people respond.
You know, one of the things you said that I thought was so interesting, because I thought about the people that I work with that are trying to lose weight, that give up doing my program. You said that people stop being vegan based on the difficulty navigating the social, cultural, and emotional pressures of the real world. And how well they do that is going to determine whether or not they stay vegan.
Yeah. So again, you're going to always have the pressures. The issue isn't that the world is, going to become a perfect place and then we can all be happy. You're always going to have pressure. You're always going to be swimming against the tide if it's doing something that's different than everybody else. Okay, how do you respond to that? That's not on them. If your family has a problem with it, or you go to a restaurant and they don't have anything you can eat, or it's raining and you can't go exercise, that's none of that is anybody else's responsibility but yours. Then you have to make different decisions. You have to take responsibility. And I think that, to me, is that's the crux, is that in the end, all of this is up to us. And I think that's really empowering. And I think it's really scary. It's really empowering because we're in control. It's really scary because we're in control. And in the end, there's nobody else to blame. If we do something, if something happens that we don't like, in the end, we are responsible, bottom line.
So Voracious Vegan, who, by the way, congratulations on winning a big prize in my contest. She won a year's supply of date syrup, and she sent me 3 bottles. That was so nice. She's talking about Miley Cyrus, and she's saying, how do we prevent experiences from hers like hurting the movement? Well, you're in luck, because Colleen has an entire podcast based on that subject, and she specifically mentions Miley Cyrus.
Yeah, I am like the last person who should be talking about celebrities, because I do not watch celebrity culture. But of course, you can't avoid these kinds of things, especially in the vegan community when it comes up. So yes, AJ is right. I have an entire episode called Ex-Vegans and Ex-Vegan Celebrities. And, I don't know, it's called In Defense of Miley Cyrus or something like that, meant to be provocative, because the point is, if you think that one person named Miley Cyrus can bring down the whole movement, you're giving a little too much power to this one person. So that's the first thing I would say, is she's one person. And I go into great detail about, again, understanding why people struggle. And because I can say something about Miley Cyrus, I can say, maybe she was feeling the pressure. Maybe she, and when I say she was feeling the pressure, that means that she didn't have the tools, or she wasn't accessing the tools that she has to withstand the pressure, whatever it is. But nonetheless, she's a human being who lives in the same world we do. And we all experience pressure, and we all experience pushback, right? Even celebrities with a lot of money. Like, money and celebrity does not protect you from being human and from all of the insecurities that we experience. So I don't know Miley Cyrus from Adam. I don't know her at all. I have no idea what her issues are, but I do know that I will say that one thing we do know about when people stop being vegan is many of them, a high percentage of them, want to come back. And if we're just critical and mean and just unkind and judgmental, like, if you think people want to be part of a club like that, you're wrong, because she can hear it. Now, I'm not talking, I'm using Miley as an example, right? But people can see what you're saying. And the kinds of responses that I see people have when these things happen are just so soul crushing, like, to see how people characterize other human beings, failures and faults. Like, we're all struggling here. We're all trying to do the best we can. So in the end, I think modeling is the best thing we can do. So if we want to, be the best, if we want the world to be as compassionate as possible, we need to be as compassionate as possible. So I have a lot to say about that. You can listen to the podcast.
Well, it's just what really struck out is you said something like that the person that is the least deserving of compassion is probably the person that needs it the most. And while it's true, it's very difficult.
It is the most difficult thing, but that doesn't mean we don't try. We're going to fail, shoot for the moon, you'll hit the stars. I mean, it is very difficult. But again, in the end, I know this is controversial, but even if someone else is behaving badly, it's still about how we respond. It's not about them. It's about us. Each of us are only responsible. We're only responsible for our own response to things, our own thoughts, our own actions, our own words. So yeah, even the unkindest person deserves compassion, not because you're condoning bad behavior, but because how else do you put compassion in the world except to demonstrate compassion? And I think the problem with compassion, it's really such a shame, AJ, we talked briefly before we hit record, is, and I didn't say this, but I wanted to say this, is that I really find that even if you go look at titles on, in bookstores of books about compassion, so many of them, most of them are around Buddhism. And I think it's just a shame because I feel like we've given over this concept of compassion to, which I think Buddhism is a wonderful religion and a wonderful way of practicing in the world. But compassion, this is a universal principle. And there's so many misconceptions about it. The biggest one you just said, which is that if I show compassion to someone, even someone who behaves badly, abhorrently, then I'm condoning the behavior. I think that's a real misconception. And I think it's a real shame because it's the absolute opposite.
It's just interesting to me, though, that why so many celebrities feel the need to, when they go vegan publicly with a big bang. And then also when they're not vegan to say, because I find that people that have done my weight loss program do the same thing. They start out, they're having success and they do blogs and YouTubes and Facebooks, look at me. And then when it doesn't work, then they bash the program just like they bash some. I'm not saying Miley is bashing veganism, but there are some celebrities that afterwards, then they come out in the other way saying how unhealthy it is. Not that it didn't work for me, but that it's unhealthy. It doesn't work. You shouldn't do it either. See, there's a difference.
Of course. And that's back to, we have to couch our behavior in a way that makes us look good. Who's going to come out and say, I had some character flaws and I had some moral failings and I wasn't disciplined and therefore I didn't continue. Very few people are going to do that. They have to couch it in a way that makes it seem like it's out of my control. I wasn't in control. I would do this if I could. I mean, you hear a lot of ex-vegans say if I could have, I would have continued, as if somebody else is pulling the strings in their life. You're the one who makes the decisions. You're the one who literally puts the food in your mouth. I'm thinking as an adult, no one else is feeding you. So the idea that we just give over responsibility is part of that need to couch bad behavior, harmful behavior in a positive way. But I want to touch on what you said about why celebrities are feel inclined to make a big deal about it. We all do. When we read something we love, when something is in our life that has changed our lives and changed our thinking, we become passionate about it. We want to share it with the world. We want to shout it from the rooftops. That's one of the stages I talk about in The Joyful Vegan. We all do that. The difference is Miley Cyrus has millions of followers, we don't, I don't, right? So the point is that everybody does that, or even the weight loss folks you're talking about. That's what we do when we're really passionate about something. That's just a natural response. We want to share good news with each other. So this is all in the chapter called Evangelism or Vegangelism. And I talk about evangelism. The word evangelism means literally spreading the good news. So we all do that. The problem is now you've put yourself, you've made expectations both of yourself and of other people. And that's the problem. And then again, I would just say, well, then that's our problem. If you had expectations of somebody, that's your problem. Even if someone comes out and says, I'm vegan now, it's the best thing in the world. I want the whole world to be vegan. It's the same thing when Ellen DeGeneres came out and she said she wasn't vegan. Everyone's I'm so disappointed. If you're disappointed in someone, it's because you had expectations of them. I know that's very difficult to hear because people want to say, no, they're a thought leader. They're the ones who, she said it, she came out, she's got followers, she's got a responsibility. No. If you had expectations of anybody, I don't care if it's your mother or Ellen DeGeneres, you had expectations, which means, you're going to be disappointed. So again, in the end, it still comes back to us. And I think that's just a lot easier to handle because I know that it's enough just dealing with me, like my life and my thinking and my behavior, like it's enough just to deal with me. I don't want to also have to deal with, trying to control the rest of the world.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I hear people say, well, if you're vegan for the animals, you'll never stop being vegan. And that's why I went vegan at the age of 17. I also heard a statistic from a guest this week, and I don't know if it's true, that most people go vegan between the ages of 17 and 25, like college almost.
That's interesting. Yeah. So there are data that indicate that there's a higher rate of recidivism in people who do it for health reasons. And it's a slight difference. It's not a huge difference. And there's a couple different reasons that could be why. Some of it could be what I was talking about in the stage one is the voracious consumption of information. If you subscribe to rigid eating and you believe that veganism or plant-based eating or whatever is going to be the savior to all of your health problems, and you have any kind of health issue, you're going to blame it on that. You're going to blame it on veganism. And then you swing to the other side and you stop being vegan. But some of it is because people who do it for health or weight loss do tend to, again, participate in rigid eating, like calorie restriction, like this kind of rigid eating where you're only eating one kind of food or you're eliminating a lot of other foods. And when you do that, the risk is just higher that you're not going to feel as good. The problem is all you need to do is add more calories or add more of this or add more of that or just change things. But what happens is they usually throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that's one of the reasons why there does seem to be a higher rate of recidivism among people who say they do it for health or diet. Among those who do it for ethics, there is data to suggest this. And I think this is very interesting. I think there's something there. I remember hearing a story years ago, and I have worked so hard to find the actual study, and I haven't been able to. It was a story on NPR, and it was basically about how there seems to be evidence that if we make behavior changes that are based on the knowledge that someone else is harmed, if I participate in this behavior, we're more inclined to not participate in that behavior. So for instance, there was a woman who talked about how she had quit smoking, and she quit smoking for herself, just because it was unhealthy. And, I think her daughter was like, you need to quit. Fine. So she quit. She wanted to start smoking again. And what she started to do was think about what her daughter's life would be like if she died of lung cancer. And just thinking about how her daughter would be affected by her death stopped her from picking up a cigarette again. And I think there's something to that when it comes to people who stop eating animals because they don't want to contribute to violence against them. When your motivation is for someone else, there does seem to be a bit more of a stickiness, and you do tend to not want to cause harm to them, which I think is very interesting because it says that we, again, we're more altruistic and care more about what other people that other people or other beings don't suffer than only ourselves. So, but it's both. I mean, some of this is anecdotal, but in the end, I still think it comes down to the social and emotional and cultural aspects.
I've heard vegans, even prominent vegans, actually saying, well, if you're not vegan for the animals, you shouldn't be vegan. And to me, that's kind of stupid because I don't think the animals personally care why a person doesn't eat them.
Of course not. Of course not. And again, if you think, if you think that people are going to respond to that, I think that's really misguided because people don't respond to judgment. We just don't. I don't know, think for a moment if there's ever been a time where someone gave you some kind of they judged you, or they wagged their finger in your face, or they told you were bad, or they told you were uncompassionate, they told you didn't care, they told you, how do you respond to that? I mean, your response is usually okay, I'm out. I don't want to talk to you. You don't make me feel good. And so there's just no upside to just concluding that the only way to live in this world is the way you think people should live in this world, there's just very little upside to it. So you can think that, it's just not going to work.
What's interesting is I sometimes vegans are some of the most judgmental, unkind people I've ever met, unfortunately. And that doesn't bode well for trying to bring people into your community.
No. And, some of it is, and I talk about this in the chapter on the angry vegan. So chapter 5 is anger. And, we all get it. Anger is a very real response to the injustice we see and the violence we see perpetrated against other beings. It is horrific. Most of us are motivated by that to even make the change in the first place. I was. But for me, underneath the anger is sorrow. It's sadness. And I think what the problem is that sorrow and sadness are not as culturally supported as anger is. It is very different to if you presented to the world tears and sadness when talking about animals, it would be a very different response that you get from people than when you talk like this. But because anger is just so much more supported, we encourage people to lead with anger, when really, if we led with the sorrow that is really underneath it, people would be more receptive to it. So I think, again, it comes down to the conversation about compassion, that people think that if you're compassionate to uncompassionate people, that means you're condoning bad behavior. It's the same thing. I think people think if you're not angry all the time, it demonstrates that you don't care. And so my world, my life, my work is all about helping people walk the line between saying that's not okay, and I'm going to help change that, and I don't want to be part of that, and that makes me angry. And also saying, but I don't have to be angry all the time to prove that I care. I don't have to demonstrate outrage to demonstrate that I'm righteous. And I think that's what it comes down to. So it's not to say like anger is bad. It's not to say that passion shouldn't be there. We need to be passionate. We need to have something that's driving us, but that doesn't mean you have to sustain it in a way that frankly is ineffective as an advocate, but also unhealthy. And unsustainable. You can't sustain that kind of outrage without there being some ill effects.
Yeah, I think it just hurts you because, of course, the injustices towards animals is the most horrific thing. And that's why those of us that became vegan for ethical reasons are that way. But us going around angry all the time at the injustice, it doesn't do anything to improve their situation. Not really.
That's right. That's exactly right. We need to be strategic. We need to be thoughtful. We need to be smart. We need to be intelligent. We have to have a plan, right? It's, there is a time to go out into the streets and scream and wave your flag. There is a time for that, but you can't do that all the time. We need to change laws. We need to change minds. We need to change hearts. We need to change policies. These are the kinds of things we need to do. And we have to be strategic in those things. We can't just always just literally be rattling the cage. You can, it's not really in the end going to have much of an effect. And in the end, it's going to make people not attracted to you. And I mean that, I don't mean that in a superficial way. I mean, literally, anger doesn't attract people, right? Passion attracts people. Openness attracts people, right? Information attracts people. But in the end, we don't want to repel people. I think we want to welcome it. And yet, I do think there are some people who is it that says it, that wants to make veganism the smallest club in the world, right? Because we want to just shut out everybody who doesn't think the way we do. And good luck with that. Like, that's also not going to work.
It's interesting because as somebody who I'm still an ethical vegan. That's why I started. It took me 26 years to even eat a vegetable. So it's not like I was shouting this at the beginning. I find that it really wasn't until the movie Forks Over Knives, it was about health. It was a wonderful film. And then movies like Game Changers, that seems to be what brings at least newer people. And I don't want to say more, but like the older people. And so I think of those as a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, most of us walk through one door, but we wind up staying for many reasons, because we can care about more than one thing at a time. So this idea that you're only an ethical vegan or you're only a health-based vegan, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, we can care about all of these things at the same time. We don't have to choose one, but that's the problem. I use the analogy of like a stadium. When we first arrive, because I actually have been really working with this idea and articulating this idea that I don't believe believe there is one movement. This idea that there's one movement called a vegan movement or this plant-based movement, there isn't one movement. There is a commonality that we all share, which is not eating animal products. But then within that commonality, there are so many different ways to live and think. That could be raw vegan, that could be plant-based, that could be no oil, that could be ethical, whatever. Like, there's so many ways. Those are the things that we share, right? Is not eating animal products, but we're not one single movement. The problem is, if you think you're one single movement, you're going to see other people who don't think the same way you do as imposters, or you're going to see them as betraying the cause. That's because you think that everybody came in for the same reason and they didn't. So we need to just broaden our mind. And again, just worry about ourselves and talk about the things you care about. If you only want to talk about, vegetables and cooking and health then that's fine. You're going to attract the people who are interested in that. If you want to just talk about ethics, and it doesn't matter, that's okay. So, let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, because, even though there might be some things that I don't agree with and some types of activism I don't agree with, someone else might be interested in that. I'm going to keep doing what I do and attract the people who are attracted to my message. Same thing with all of these documentaries. So we need to make sure that our arms are as wide as possible to be able to welcome as many people as possible who are interested in as many different things as possible, and not blame them for then not thinking the way you do, or blame them for not coming through the same door you did.
And I agree. And I talked to you a little bit about the show. Like, I have people that are doing great things in the world, but if they're like not perfect, I mean, I'm not saying you guys watching right now, but certain people just jump on any slight imperfection. Like, for example, like me, my dog's not vegan. I could lie about it and just say she is. I rescued her very old. I tried. She's very small. She does eat the vegan kibble, but she eats 3 ounces of meat a day. I feel terrible about it. So, I mean, what do I do? If I walk her and there's a dead animal, she'll try to eat it. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I get criticized for that all the time, even though I've been vegan for 44 years, which is longer than most people, and have helped so many people be vegan. But it's like people they'll find the one area to just get, it's just, this is just ridiculous, because Caroline says we don't need a few perfect vegans. We need tons of people eating less animals and more plants.
That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, my motto is don't do nothing because you can't do everything, do something, anything. And the problem is that, the way I talk about veganism, AJ, is different than a lot of people, because I actually don't see veganism as the goal. Like, the goal isn't to be vegan. The goal isn't to wear this badge called vegan. The goal is not to be part of a club called vegan. The goal is optimal wellness and unconditional compassion. And the way to get there, as we have all found, the best way to get there and the most enjoyable way to get there is through being vegan. And so for me, being vegan is the means to the end. The end is compassion, not the end. So when you think about being vegan as the end, then what happens is you just get really caught up on perfection and purity, right? Because because you think that's the barometer. The barometer is this perfection, but that's not the way to think about it. The way to think about it is that it's a means to an end. And that means that we're going to be imperfect because we're human beings and we live in an imperfect world. But to make the best effort, to do the best we can, I mean, that's what we need to support people, and that's what we need to cheer people on. It's not betraying the animals because someone's eating peanut butter that was processed on a machine that had used, dairy or eggs. Like, that is not the problem, right? The problem is that 10 billion land animals are killed every year in the United States. And there's so much waste in the slaughterhouses because we kill so many animals that they use those byproducts to make money, to make profit, and they put them in all of these other different things. Okay, let's just reduce the number of animals who are killed, which would reduce the amount of byproducts there are, which would increase the cost of those byproducts, and they wouldn't be showing up in everything. So big picture, let's focus on not killing animals rather than focus on this purity. It doesn't make any sense. It might make you feel good, but it doesn't.
Well, but that's what the abolitionists do, unfortunately. And so, for example, I say at the beginning of your show, this is where I introduce you to amazing people who are doing great things in the world. That's really what my show is about. And yes, I'm vegan, and almost every guest has been vegan. But every now and then I'll have somebody like Dr. David Katz and Dr. Walt Willett. They're very close, but But like when you have they're icons in the nutritional world, and yet for people to attack them, I mean, it's just crazy. It almost makes me sometimes just not want to do anything. You know what I'm saying? When people attack fine people that are doing great work, but because it's, not 100%. And that's what the abolitionists do. And I find there's a lot of infighting in veganism, sort of like in Judaism. We were raised Orthodox Jewish, or actually we were raised conservative, to be honest. But my parents sent me to parochial Orthodox school. So all my friends were Orthodox. And I could see like Orthodox, the Hasidic Jews criticized the Orthodox for not being Jewish enough. And the Orthodox criticized the conservatives who criticized the Reform and all the different other factions. And it's like, I thought we were all on the same team. And I find that so much with veganism, that there's just all this infighting when we shouldn't be I'm not saying that the other should be the enemy, but why are we focusing our attention fighting with each other's instead of, if we're going to fight, with the people that are hurting, murdering animals, killing animals? It just drives me crazy sometimes.
Yeah, you have to just kind of put it aside because it can drive you crazy. But I mean, look, you can look at all of these schisms that have happened in religion and all of these different philosophical movements over the course of many centuries. This is what human beings do. There's a term for it. It's literally, the concept is that that you're more likely to criticize someone who's closer to you than to criticize someone who's farther away. Some of it has to do with low-hanging fruit, right? So that you're my people, so I get to criticize you. So some of it is that, some of it is people's own, sense of purity and imperfection. I mean, we're seeing that all the time. And we're also living in this time where we really are in these, like siphons, like we're, when you aren't exposed to different ideas and other people's way of thinking, you don't know how to manage disagreement. Right. So I talk about this it's all in the Joyful Vegan, all of this, the factions, the infighting, the communication, the how to just understand that there's going to be people in the world who don't agree with you, but that doesn't mean they're evil people. And so if we don't ever engage with someone who doesn't think the same way we do, we're never going to learn to do that. We're never going to be able we're never going to be able to even articulate our own ideas well, because if you don't have someone you're arguing against, how do you hone your ideas? Like, that's why, like in debate, part of debate is actually presenting the opposing view, like you should know your opposition's view as well as you know your own, so that you can actually argue yours better. So that's the stuff that we're missing. I think we're missing debate in schools. I think we're missing, the ability to just hear someone else's viewpoint without just wanting to shut them down or calling them evil or saying, we're seeing that in every aspect of society right now. We're just seeing it everywhere. It's not new. It's been happening for centuries, but we're definitely seeing it in our own community. So what do? We do the best we can. We keep doing our work. AJ, you keep doing your work. And in the end, again, this is always going to happen. We're never going to stop that from happening. But I think we can be models of compassion and models of what it looks like to offer opposing views. And I hear what you're saying. You're not even saying that you're offering an opposing view. It's just that someone who doesn't live in the same way of thinking that your audience, some of your audience members might. But yeah,
and it's so funny because, I try not to be a rude host ever. Like I've had one guest be rude to me and it was kind of awkward, but I don't want to be that person that's going to attack people. And yet sometimes when people are like that, I feel like saying, well, what have you done? You know what I'm saying? Like, for instance, I'm not like, I was listening to your podcast about how you like to get hot water on an airplane and not take a plastic cup. And I was thinking what you need to do is get it before you get on the plane, because coffee bean and tea leaf and Starbucks will pour it right into your thermos the way that you want it done. But that's what I was wanting to tell you. But, sometimes on I have a torn rotator cuff and I had a trigger thumb. And so I'm doing a recipe on my show and I'm opening up a bag of vegetables that are already in plastic. And the amount of attacks you get for that and first of all, we have a pandemic right now, and where I live, you can't even get produce the way you used to without being wrapped in plastic. But sometimes I feel like saying to these people, what are you doing? What have you done? I know I've helped a lot of people and animals, so it drives me crazy. Or like when they attacked Dr. McDougall, who was on the show last week and will be on again Friday, they stopped him from speaking at a veg fest because he said he eats turkey every other Thanksgiving, and it's like an ounce, and I'm not even sure that's really real that he does that. But the point is it's like, what's that saying? Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I do get water before I go on the plane. Second of all, there was a situation where they would not give me water without charging me, and I refused to pay $2 for hot water. Third, I drink so much tea when I'm on planes that I have to keep filling it up.
Anyway, that was funny. I wanted to ask you, so I struggle too, so don't just, even when I do something, first of all, I'm very aware. So when I use plastic, even though I'm not perfect, I'm aware. I'm not like doing this willful blindness. I'm not saying, oh, it's okay because of this. No, I don't make excuses. I know that I'm not perfect. But I sometimes struggle with, I always like to support companies that I only buy things obviously that are 100% vegan, with the exception of the 3 ounces of meat that Bailey eats a day. And I do my best. Maybe I'm not perfect, whether it's makeup or whatever. And I also look into the company, and especially if they're going to be somebody that I promote on the show, that the company, I can't guarantee that everybody that works for that company is vegan, but at least the person in charge, they're ethical vegans kind of thing. But then sometimes what happens is a company gets bought by a company that isn't, and I have a dilemma. Like, for example, there is a product called Larabar, and I remember when that came out, I think it was in 2003 and 2004, very clean product. It's like a nut and a fruit, right? And my husband likes them. So, and I used to eat them a lot when I was heavier, but they're delicious. And then it's bought by General Mills or General Foods. I forget which one. And I don't want to support them. So what do you do in a case like that?
Yeah, in the end, we always have to make our own decisions and draw our own lines. It's just the way it is. So there's a difference between, you making a decision about what you want to support and what you don't want to support, and, and there being a movement to boycott that company completely, right? So that's the difference. But yeah, in the end, all we can do is, don't do nothing because you can't do everything. We all want to make good decisions. There are times where I spend, 15 minutes washing out glass bottles, and then I had to order something from, online that I couldn't get otherwise. And it comes with some packaged plastic packaging. So, I want to be like, well, what's the point? Why should I even bother washing those glass jars so I can keep them? Well, because we just do the best we can. That's really in the end, all we can do. Right. So again, regarding veganism, regarding zero waste, whatever it is, people tend to do nothing if they think they have to do everything. So the idea is to encourage all of us to do the best we can. What's better, doing nothing at all or doing something that gets us closer to where we want to be? I think doing something is better than doing nothing, personally, because that's what people do. They throw up their hands and say, well, this is pointless. Why should I even try? Well, because that's a good thing, because in the end, that intention also matters.
Yeah. You know what you're talking about? And I'd love for you, and I'll send you the link to listen to episode 161 of Dr. Doug Lyle's Beat Your Genes podcast, because what you're talking about is a really interesting psychological phenomenon called the ego trap, and that could explain it. And I'd love for you to check that out, because this is what I'm thinking this is. So here's a question from a live viewer. How can we cope with the recurrent injustice upon animals? I find it so overwhelming sometimes it depresses me.
Yeah, exactly. So I talk about this. A lot in the Joyful Vegan. And I talk about really where we decide to orient ourselves and what we decide to focus on. So I'm known to be very hopeful. I'm known to be very optimistic and very positive. And I know it can be how can you possibly be hopeful at a time like this? How could you possibly be hopeful? I'm hopeful because I choose to be. And I'm hopeful because that's where I choose to look. You can dwell on all of the horrors out there. There are so many, there always will be. Right. But if that's all we look at, if that's all we dwell on, and this is what I was talking about in the Bearing Witness chapter, that if that's all we look at, of course, it's going to take its toll. That's what there's an expression called compassion fatigue. I actually don't like the term compassion fatigue because I don't think we can be fatigued of compassion. I think it's more empathic distress. When we're constantly feeling so empathetic and feeling so bad for someone who's suffering, it distresses us. So you can just keep looking over there, or you can look at where there have been gains and you can look at where there has been progress. That's what I choose to look at. And then also choosing to do the work that I do is all I can do in the end is what I do. All I can do is be a messenger of hope and be a messenger of compassion and work with local officials. I mean, that's why we started the East Bay Animal Pack. We work with local government officials to get animal-friendly legislation, to get animal-friendly legislators. Feel empowered, do the work that you need to do so that you feel empowered. It's not that we shouldn't ever look. Of course we should look. And I talk about this in the book as well. We need to bear witness, but we don't have to stare. And I think that is the line that we have to walk, is we need to look so that we are taking responsibility, but that doesn't mean we have to stare. So that would be my suggestion. And I really do encourage you to pick up The Joyful Vegan, because I talk all about strategies for doing that.
Yeah. Is it on Audible? Because if it's on Audible, I'll listen to it for sure. I posted a link to it. Yeah. Because I love to listen. I've never been a guest on my own show. Can you see the comments? Because if you can't, I want to just read a few of them.
I cannot see the comments.
That's good to know, because I'm so glad, because yesterday there was a lot of not nice ones for John Mackey. So I'm glad that you can. So let me read some of them to you. So many people are just saying how beautiful your eyes are, how nice you were to them when they've met you at various veg fests. So many people started out with your book, The Joy of Vegan Baking. But I'd love to read this comment by Anne Marie. And she says, I make a big effort to lead by example. I may be the only example of a vegan that someone ever sees up close. My heart is open to all beings. I let people know that I've been much happier and connected to everyone since becoming vegan. This is a very important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think the very first time, I can't remember where I heard you speak first, was at McDougal or at a Veg Fest, could have been one of the other, but you have a word that I love, and it's excusitarian.
Well, you're going to say that. Yeah. Well, I just thought it was funny. So, I mean, we all make excuses. We all do. It's part of the willful blindness. But I decided to call people who just make incessant excuses, excusitarians. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. So people do, they get it. We don't have to be permanent excusitarians, but we all make excuses. And I mean, that's, again, the nature of human beings.
Oh boy. So I don't know what the statistics are, but there's not a lot of vegans in the world, percentage wise. There's probably more vegetarians. Why do you think it's such a tough sell? Because you would think if somebody just, like Paul McCartney said, if slaughterhouses had windows, but you wonder, really? Because I mean, so many people, their hearts are closed to even that. They don't care. And how do you wake people up? I mean, because it's like Dr. McDougall says, it's no longer about, even compassion for animals or the aesthetics or your health. It's like, we have a planet to save that is going to vanish if we keep eating the amount of animals we're eating.
Yeah, that is the question. That is the big question. And I don't mean to keep saying it, but I do talk about it in The Joyful Vegan because I wanted to answer that question as well, because I asked that question as well. Again, we are social creatures. We're very good at avoiding looking at what we need to look at. And the industries are very good. The thing that's so interesting about the industries, the euphemistic language they use, and we all take it on as well. And vegans do this too. And vegans will say things like regular milk and normal milk and vegan milk. I mean, if vegans use the word vegan one more time, my head's going to explode, because we overuse the word vegan to make it sound like it's such a different food group. It's such a different thing, when really it's fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms and grains and herbs and spices. But when we keep saying vegan, like, would you like a vegan banana? It's a banana. Like, there's no vegan banana and non-vegan. It's a banana. So we need to just demystify for people, because if people think it's a different club and it's different from what their identity is, they're going to resist it. So that's one of the issues, is, again, it comes down to us being social creatures, AJ, and a lot of it comes down to identity. So when people feel like their identity would be threatened, that whether it's their masculine identity or their cultural identity or their religious identity, right? If those things seem to butt up against this thing called vegan, then they're going to choose the thing that is familiar to them, which is their identity. So I talk about that in The Joyful Vegan, about how to navigate that for people and help them realize this is not antithetical to your identity. we hold many different identities, and compassion is one of our identities, and our desire to be well is one of our identities. But that's a big part of it, is how we navigate in the world as an individual and how we navigate as part of this larger social group. If we think that we're going to be outside of our social group, it is one of the most stressful things. You might not think it, you might not feel it consciously, but not being part of this, not having social belonging is one of the most stressful things for human beings. And if they see vegan as being something that's antithetical to what they already experience, they're going to resist it. And so I was going to say, what I think is really interesting about the euphemistic language that the industries use, and of course, keeping it all hidden from us, is that they know we're so compassionate that we would be bothered by it. So they have to use language that's going to, again, couch our behavior and their practices in a way that makes it seem positive, right? So we say, I did it. I said I bought humane meat and I bought organic eggs and I did all the things that you do when you say, well, I'm still doing that, but I'm still a good person, right? That, I'm still a good person. I'm not going to change too much, but I'm still doing the right thing. The industries know that about us. And so they tap into that compassionate part of us. And I think that's what's the most interesting thing about the excuses we make. So what's the answer? We keep speaking the truth. We keep doing the work we do. I am so encouraged by the companies who are creating these incredible products like Miyoko's, like game changer, right? Why was it so hard to create really delicious cashew-based cheese? It's so simple, right? So I'm so encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by the potential for clean meat. I do think there is a potential market there. So I'm encouraged by all the innovators who are coming out with all the different solutions. It's not going to be one solution. It's not going to be one solution. I wish more people understood that there's been alternatives to meat before all of the, vegan meats came on the market. They're called vegetables. Like, you and I know this, right? We've been teaching cooking for how many years, right? I mean, we know this. But it's still, people want convenience. They want it fast. They want something familiar. They want that, they want what they grew up with. I mean, that's what we all want. Most of us who grew up in the US, we don't crave the things that people eat in West Africa. We don't crave the things they eat in Indonesia, because we grew up wanting these things, eating in a particular way, plating our food in a particular way, eating the meat, eating the dairy, right? That's why we crave these things, is because that's all we've ever known. So I get that. But, it's not going to be just me teaching people how to make great vegetables. I'm not going to stop doing that, but it's not going to be just that. It's not going to just be the products. It's not going to just be the policies. It's not going to just be the laws. It's not going to just be changing people's minds. It's going to be all of these things together. So that's why I always encourage, and one of the stages in the Joyful Vegan is the stage of finding your place. What's your role in this? If you want to be part of the solution, ask the questions. What am I good at? What do I love? What am I passionate about? And what does the world need? We need all of it. We need all of it. If there was one way to do this, we would have done it by now. There's not one way. So all of us have to do what we think is the most meaningful and effective, and be effective and do it well.
Yeah. Well, I think that might have been the best line I've heard on this show. There's always been an alternative to meat. It's called vegetables. That is hilarious. Mitzi says, I met Colleen at the San Francisco Veg Fest a few years ago, and she hasn't aged a bit. And I said the same thing to her. It's like she has frozen in time. So she must be doing something right. Yeah, this is just really such an important conversation, and that people need to have. And I hope they'll listen to your podcast, because you discuss this in so many different episodes. Because it's, I love what you said about the reasons people stop being vegan. People have to really understand that this is something that Dr. Lau talks about in The Pleasure Trap, in his Getting Along Without Going Along channel. It is because of that social piece. Because, when I think about it, I get attacked mostly by people that are ethical vegans that maybe aren't so healthy, and maybe I'm confronting to them. It's confrontational because I used to be heavy and I'm not, and I still am an ethical vegan, but I just eat a health promoting diet now, and they're always saying, well, you're doing such a disservice because you're making it so hard for people to be vegan. And I'm really trying to make it easy for people that suffer from food addictions to recover from that. I have we all have our little different areas that we work in. I think we're all important, but I just wish, my wish for compassion is that at least vegans would start being compassionate to each other. Let's start there, Yeah,
let's all just, if any time we're tempted to criticize somebody else, just turn it back on ourselves. And I mean the criticism, I mean the questions and the questioning. if we all just kind of took care of our own backyards, if we all just did the best we could, we were the most compassionate we could be, it really would be a very different world. We would push things along much faster. The amount of time, I mean, one of the things I'd encourage people to do is like try to have a day without complaining. I don't care if you're complaining about yourself or someone else or the world or this virus, whether it's raining, whatever it is. Just try to have a day without complaining, right? It's very difficult to do. So anytime you're tempted to do that, go spend your time learning something new. Spend your time trying to be the best person you can be. Go spend your time and focus on all the things like you said in the beginning, you know, where I said that the people who are the least compassionate probably need our compassion most of all. If there are people, whatever you think is lacking in the world, go fill it. If you think AJ is not doing enough to promote healthy living or whatever it is, you go do that. If you don't think someone's being compassionate enough, you go be compassionate. If you don't think someone's speaking articulately enough, you go speak articulately. So take whatever you think is the problem with somebody else and you go fill that and you go make sure that that gap is filled. That would be my message to everybody.
Amen, sister. And remember, my mom always said, when you're pointing a finger at someone, 3 are pointing back at you. This has just been such a wonderful conversation. I think you're writing another book. Is that correct?
Well, I'm always working on something. I mean, the two topics right now that are just really close to my heart is animalogy. So I just had a TEDx talk on animalogy, which is the animal related words and expressions we use. So I'm always working on animalogy, but I'm also working on a zero waste book. And so it's in a very, very early stages. And it's a lot of recipes, a lot of homemade recipes and that kind of thing. But just kind of helping people understand the concept. Because again, zero waste, that's also an aspiration. It is not about being perfect. It's an aspiration to value the things that we take in our lives and to take responsibility for what we take in our lives. So that's what I'm working on right now, but I'm always working on something.
Well, anytime you have something to promote, please let me know and we can talk about it. And tell us about the cooking classes that you're doing online. Now, that wasn't something I was aware of.
Yeah, it's so much fun. So, you know, I taught cooking classes for a long time. I taught them in Oakland here. I taught them for Dr. McDougall. I used to teach them for the Cancer Project. I mean, cooking was one of the things I started as like one of my main forms of advocacy because people who were moved to make a difference and to make a change were like, okay, now what do I eat? And me, armed with my master's in English literature, I would start teaching cooking classes because that's what you do with the master's in English literature. So I started teaching cooking classes many years ago and I stopped. And one of the reasons I stopped is because it's so much darn work. And especially when I was teaching for Dr. McDougall, he was like one of the last people I was teaching for. You know, driving up to Santa Rosa, it was an hour from here. I had to shop, I had to prep, I had to drive, I had to set up, I had to shut down, I had to carry everything. It's a lot of work unless you have like a dedicated space. So, but I miss teaching. I love teaching and I love teaching cooking. And so after February, when I said I had the Joyful Vegan Conference and we did it online and I became a little more adept at Zoom than I had been, I just pivoted and I said, let's teach a class and let's see if anybody shows up and let's see if anybody's interested. And I taught them weekly through the end of the year. So they went from April to the end of the year and we started up again in January. So people can join from wherever they are. We have a different theme every week. This one that's coming up is just, quick and easy meals for lazy cooks and busy bees, I call it. We're doing homemade tofu. The homemade tofu class in 2020 was the most popular class because people they love the idea of making their own tofu. We've got pressure cooking classes, air fryer classes. So we've got cuisines. I do Italian cuisine or Mexican cuisine or Thai cuisine. So they've been super fun. And I just really love having people join. Lots of people come like for every class. And so a community has really built around them.
That sounds great. And Linda Middlesworth, our mutual friend, says, you are an amazing force for good, Colleen. Both you and Miyoko used to teach for Dr. McDougall, and I actually get to do it now, and I'm loving it. Did you enjoy your time there?
Right. I love it. The people who come are they're just so open. They're just like, feed me, give me everything you could possibly give me. That is, I think, the mark of there's the most beautiful thing about humans is when we're vulnerable and curious and just say, teach me, tell me what to do, tell me how to be better. And that's what I found about all of the participants at McDougall's. Like I was in love with them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love cooking for them. They're just so appreciative of the knowledge. So, and I'm so appreciative of your knowledge. And like I said at the beginning, it's people like you and Saint Miyoko that inspire me just to do a better job, and people like John Pierre. Because, I mean, I feel like I'm doing my best, but then there are times that I am an excusitarian and I know I can do better. And it's when I see people like you doing what you're doing that just makes me want to try harder.
You're doing great. Just don't pay attention to all of the negative stuff. Do your work and step back. That is the bottom line. Do your work, step back, plant your seeds, let them grow. The rest is not yours, but you're doing fabulous. And I love that you're pivoting, and like you're also like all we can do is just keep asking, like, what can I do better? What's my contribution? How can I make this world a better place? And we might get different answers, and they might change. We don't have to stay stagnant and doing the same thing because that's what people expect, or that's what we've, that's the box that we got compartmentalized in. So just keep asking, keep growing, keep changing, keep evolving. That is what it means to be human. And we have a very limited time on this earth. And all we can do is just take advantage of every moment we have and do the best we can to make it the best world we can. So thank you for doing what you're doing to make it the best world we can have.
Well, thank you. And remember what Colleen says, just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything.
That's right. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Colleen. It's been wonderful. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow at the regular time of 11 a.m. Pacific time when we have St. Louis Veggie Girl making an eggplant manicotti with tofu ricotta and cashew bechamel. And if you ever want to cook something on my show to promote your cooking classes, even just one recipe, I would love to see that as well.
That'd be fun. Love it.
All right. Thanks so much, Colleen. Take care.